Okay, well, obviously, grew up with Brian Main and Jeff Main. Didn't know growing up when we were in high school, about his all their other family where they actually came from, which was back in Georgia. Brian got me involved in going go-kart racing, and obviously we started finding out about more why he was involved in racing. And his uncle Ken Ragan got him into racing go-karts back when Brian would go back on summers and be around the family. Well, Ken's got two kids, David Ragan and Adam Ragan, and David obviously was coming up about that same time in the same stair-stepping manner in which my boys have done it. And so we got into go-kart racing because of Brian Main, which when you look at it indirectly, it goes back to Ken Ragan, okay? He raced back when he was younger, and then obviously David followed in his footsteps. And so the same footsteps that my boys followed is what David did. When David was 12, he was racing legend cars. When he was I think 8 and up, he was racing Bandoleros. Then he went to Thunder Roadsters. And basically, being around Brian Main and then traveling out to Atlanta and to Charlotte, I feel I basically became part of the Ragan family. I mean, his brother Adam calls me at least once a month, and we spend a lot of time. David's dad actually let Brian and my boys and I live in a little farmhouse they had during the summer shootout, and we followed David in his footsteps since. And my boys look up to David and have always said that they want to do the same thing that David's doing. When they were 6 and 7, they thought it was easy to do. They just thought if you want to be a race car driver, you could. They now understand how hard David had to work, and other race car drivers or professional athletes as a general have to work to be successful at what they do. It's a full-time commitment. It's not just a race on Sunday. David can tell you from the time he was probably 16 till now, there's really not much off time. People think it's glorious to be a race car driver. There's a lot of behind the scenes things that we do not see that somebody like David does besides racing on Sunday.
Yeah, in order to be a Sprint Cup Series driver, you have to have a lot of experience on and off the racetrack. Experience driving the cars at the different tracks, communicating with the crew, communicating with the engineers in order to go faster and race harder. But you've also got to be experienced off the racetrack, learning how to speak well on camera, represent a company, the series in which you're racing in. They leverage who you are as a driver, your attitude, your persona, to draw more fans. You have to be fan friendly. Some guys can go the villain role, but some guys can go the favorite and the good person role. But in order to get to that top level, it takes many, many years of honing your skills on and off the racetrack. And much like stick and ball sports, those kids were playing baseball and basketball at a very young age, and it's the same thing in motorsports. The guys that are successful at the top level, whether it's open wheel racing across the world or here in the U.S. where stock car racing is the most popular, a lot of these guys, and including myself, started racing when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. And so much like what Kyle has done in his short career, even though he's 18 years old, he's still been racing for half of his life. And that's what it takes. You've got to have that experience and that feel behind the wheel of a race car, that when you sit down and you mash the throttle, when you apply a little bit of brake, when you turn left, when you turn right, you can give that feedback and you can do it well. And so when kids are 18, 19, 20 years old, they're ready for the big times because they've had the proper training. And I got my training at a young age driving Bandolero cars, Legends cars in the Southeast, started racing some late model cars, progressed into the ARCA series, and really the ARCA series was kind of the catalyst for me to get to that next level. It provided a great opportunity for me to drive at the big tracks, Michigan and Pocono and Daytona, Kentucky, Kansas, those tracks that NASCAR races at, all the while running a 3,400 pound car, 700 horsepower, having a pit crew, making pit stops. So when I jumped into a Craftsman truck or the Xfinity series, I was ready. I felt comfortable. And so much like my career really accelerated when I turned 18, 19, 20 years old, Kyle's in that position now. He's made the starts in the ARCA series. He's been able to win. He's got a taste of the short tracks, the big tracks, the road courses. And so that next step in the NASCAR divisions, whether it's the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series, it's kind of second nature, but because that's what he's been doing. And in his background, Kyle racing the Bandolero cars and the Legends cars, very much mirrored what I had to do, but a lot of others, Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, Kurt Busch, a lot of these young kids that are winning races in the Cup Series kind of went through those same rates. I see Kyle around some, living in Charlotte, North Carolina. You always seem to bump into one another. You know, that's a racing capital of the world, and so Kyle worked closely with the Roush Fenway Group, which I drove for a number of years in my career. I've still got some family members that work over at the Roush shop, so we see each other around town. I see, you know, his brother and his sister as a babysitter sometimes for my two little girls. So, you know, we see each other at the racetracks. I always enjoy going back and kind of keeping an eye on certainly the young kids that I know, but just in general, the ARCA series and the Truck Series. I'm a race fan, so I love, you know, tuning in and watching some of those tracks that I grew up racing at when the ARCA series is racing there. So I keep an eye on Kyle. If it's not in person, watching on TV or catching up online. It's a really cool feeling to see a young kid like Kyle that I met a long time ago. He was just a little boy, and now he's here, you know, running close to 200 miles an hour, contending for wins in the ARCA series. It makes me feel a lot older. In the grand scheme of things, I'm only 30. That's young, but in the motorsports world, that's getting old. And so the next generation, drivers like Kyle, they're going to be taking my job in the next 5 years. And so that's an evolution that happens. When I was 18, I was taking the guys' jobs when they were in their 30s and 40s. So that's the way the cycle works. But yeah, I'm proud to know that, you know, I've influenced these guys some over the years, and I've had a good group around me as a young driver, trying to learn the ins and the outs and what's wrong and what's right, getting to the next level. I think Kyle's had good training. He's had good people surrounding him that he's learned how to work on the cars, how to speak to the sponsors, how to be fan friendly, how to be, you know, personal with the crew. And when he gets in and puts his helmet on and the window neck goes up, it's all business. And I'm still learning. You know, this sport is very hard. This is the premier motorsports in the world. You've got some of the best drivers, some of the best team owners, the smartest engineers that have, you know, helped put man on the moon, that are figuring out how to make these race cars go faster. So this is the big leagues, and I think that you need to keep that in perspective. You need to remember to have fun, but it's very tough. And some of the things that we've talked about earlier, you do have to be disciplined along the way, because it's not always going to be easy. You've got to be focused, and you've got to be responsible for trying to get better, and that means physically being strong enough to where you can manhandle one of those cars for several hours, mentally tough to where you can race side by side and not tear your race car up, and be smart enough to give good information, and then have the natural ability, which I think Kyle has shown that he's got that. And so it's important to have good family surrounding and supporting you, because on some days you're not going to win all the races, and it's how you react when you finish 5th, or when you finish 10th, or maybe when you wreck or you blow an engine. It's how you rebound from those days is kind of what makes you who you are. Everyone can enjoy when you're winning and everything's good, but you're going to have a lot of struggles from day one to the day you retire. So, you know, work hard, stay focused, and certainly stay disciplined, but all while keeping in the back of your mind it should be fun, and to enjoy it the most you can.
You know, people like Ken Ragan, you know, Brian Main, Jeff Main, Buddy, Marvin Ragan, which was his uncle that we've lost both. We'd like to thank all of those people. And, you know, again, we said it earlier before David was here, you can always thank the people that have been involved in what you've done, but at the same time, you can't forget them. And these are the type of people I'd like to know.
You know, one thing I've learned over time is relationships are important, and that's not only and from a business perspective, which are very important, but from a family's perspective, are away from the racetrack. And I feel like that, we've got a good relationship with Daryn and his family, and certainly the kids and some of the people that you meet that are totally strangers one day, and 5-10 years down the road, they're good friends. And so I think that Kyle has that instilled in him, and he could be a good representative for a company to kind of get in on the early side. And Kyle's young enough and healthy enough, got the experience that he's got a long career in front of him, and it happens fast. I feel like it was really 10, 12 years ago, and I was exactly in Kyle's shoes. I was 18 years old, racing my ARCA car here at Michigan, walking around the Cup Garage, networking, trying to shake hands and, tell everyone to watch and tune in, and things can kind of fall your way, and before you know it, you're taking the green flag in the Daytona 500.
And we were there for his first Daytona 500. He finished third. And again, small world, but that's basically also how we got involved with Roush. Jack called his dad's cell phone wanting to know where they were at, and I took the phone and said, Ken Ragan's phone, and it was Jack saying, where are you at, where are you at, stay there. I saved that number. How many years ago was that?
That was 10 years ago.
And I called Jack on my own because I saved that number 10 years later. But I also can tell you, I remember David, the first time I met him down at Texas Motor Speedway, racing a Busch car at that time, and he was a baby.
Yeah.
And now he has 2 kids. Yeah. And it seems like it was yesterday.
It does.
It really does. It seems like it was yesterday.
Life happens fast.
Yeah.
It does.
I can also tell you how serious it gets. So when he got into the truck series and was sharing it with Mark Martin, he doesn't have any free time. And David actually came to Lake of the Ozarks when they were going to Kansas, and he came down, and I was pouring a concrete floor at my house, and David's walking around barefoot in the concrete, pouring concrete, and he learned how to surf that day. And how much have you been on the water since then?
Maybe 5 times in 10 years.
Okay, so again, that was early in his series, and now he's focusing on racing, sponsorship, and his kids. But once you get to that, people don't understand. These racers, even though they get some off time, he's got interviews, commercials, home for a little bit, and then he's turning right around now on a Thursday coming back.
And that's why it's so important that young kids, that they're our future, because they don't have a lot of those distractions. Once you get in your 30s and you're worried about setting up your kids' college fund, you're worried about your kids going to school or eating right, or you get a little older and you lose a little bit of focus, and there's just a lot of things that are going on. I can tell just within 5 years where on an off weekend it was no worries. I was going racing. I was doing something else with my race team, but now I'm going to the beach with my family, which I'm happy that those priorities are in place. But that's why usually you see the kids that are in their late teens and early 20s, they're excelling because they don't have those other distractions. Kyle, he's not married. I don't think he is. No kids, and he's focused on racing, and that's what helped me get to that next level, and I'm glad that I made it. And I had 4 or 5 years of no distractions where I could go racing, and now I've got good distractions, but nevertheless they are distractions.
I have to say one more thing, and I want to thank everybody for the time. The other thing that Ken Ragan and Brian Main taught me for my kids was, my kids have not been around drugs, alcohol, parties, and other stuff like that. In the racing industry, you do not have, you cannot be around it, okay? They drug test you, they alcohol test you, but again, they've grown up with a group of kids that are in the same environment, and they haven't been around that type of stuff. And David's saying, I watched David growing up. It's being around your racing family that has really supported that whole group of these young athletes coming up, because they don't tolerate it. And look at the racers that are out there. Look at David, look at Kyle, look at Chris Buescher. These are some very respectful kids, and they weren't always, you can't say that the parents had all that to do that. The racing family helped turn all these young boys into young men that have been very professional.
Yeah, kids mature so much quicker when they're racing. I can talk to kids that are 7 or 8 years old that have been racing
5 years older.
Yeah, and they're a lot more mature than other kids their age. And so when most kids are 18, they're worried about goofing off on summer break, going to the beach, playing video games at their house, and 18-year-olds in the racing world that are taking it serious, like Kyle. He's here worrying about his image, his team that he's got to go out and race hard for, how to get his race car faster, traveling. He's probably got a passport where he can go and come as he pleases. And so those are things that normal 18-year-olds haven't even crossed their mind. And he's already learned how to travel on his own, and he's got a budget to work off of, and he's working on his future a lot earlier than most kids. They don't even think about their future until they're in their mid to late 20s, which is okay. But I think the racing world encourages you.
Yeah, you have to grow up.
To grow up and mature quicker.
Yeah, I think David did some homeschooling. I know Chris Buescher did. Kyle had to finish his last 2 years of high school and teaching himself with some online courses. But again, when I first met David, he was a kid, but he was a young man because he had to act 5 to 6 years older than he was, because you're dealing with a car that's going 180 miles an hour, and you are in control of your own life, others around you, and this is serious. And I mean, David is never really, even when I first met him, and I think he was 16, has never acted like a young kid. Chris Buescher, Kyle, Clayton, they don't play video games. They do this.
We're living the video.
You're living the video game.